Hi, in this tutorial we'll take a look at the improvements made to the Manifold 3D node, Manifold UV node and the Image node, as well as shortly take a look at the new addition of Manifold Pi Locator. Let's take a look at the Manifold 3D node first, and I'm going to create a noise that I'm going to use for testing. And let's create a Manifold 3D node. The Manifold 3D node is similar to a 3D placement node that you might be used to, for example, in Maya, so it allows you to scale things in 3D space. So the Manifold 3D in this case is attached to the Manifold handle, and you will see this Manifold handle on quite a few extension pack nodes, so you can use those to drive things with manifolds. So let's go to the node properties of the Manifold, and in here we have the usual options where you can scale things, rotate them, translate them, etc. A new addition is the Transform by Locator. This allows you to create a locator in your viewport and visually modify things directly in the viewport. So let's click on the little plus icon. This has added a locator to my scene, and it's also in my object palette, so it's part of the Mari project now. Let's click on the P icon, and we're entering the Transform Selected Object mode, and we see our locator. So now if I move things, you can see I'm translating my noise. I can rotate it. Oops. Unfortunately, the bounding boxes of these locators are extremely poor. So it's a bit tricky sometimes to click on them. You've seen that I mistakenly clicked on the object instead. I hope the Foundry improves that in the future. But you can see I can do all the usual transformations that you would expect from such a locator gizmo. By clicking on the object, we'll get back to our original node graph. Next, let's take a look at the Manifold UV node, which is very similar. However, there are some very decisive differences. So I'm going to create a merge node first. And let's create an image node and a Manifold UV node. Let's hook up the Manifold UV to the image node and the image node to our merge node. And first off, I want to have a little label on this gramophone. So I'm going to drag an image in here. And you can see the image is repeated in every UDIM, which I really don't want. So I only want one instance of this image applied to my object. With extension pack 4, you can now set an image node to stencil mode. So if I turn this on, everything will go away because currently this image sits in UDIM 1001. This UDIM is, however, a different one. So I'm entering the correct UDIM number, and now you see my image appears where it's supposed to. Now let's head to the Manifold UV node and position this a little bit better. So I could go in here and scale things, and you see I only have one instance of my label applied to the UVs the way I want it. And I could go in and manually transfer this, into the correct position, or I could also use the locators here. So under the locator section, we have a Locator Translation. Currently the Manifold UV only supports a translation locator. So I'm gonna pick an existing locator and again click on the little P icon. And let's move things around. And nothing's happening. The Manifold UV node works on 2D coordinates, right? So in a UV space, if I quickly go back to my object, I would have to move things in Y or in X. This locator gizmo is a 3D gizmo, obviously. So the green arrow is the Y axis, the red one is the X axis, and the blue one is the Z axis. Let's go to the locator axis remap, which allows us to set how things are translated from a 3D gizmo to a 2D coordinate system. So my X, in this case, is actually my Z axis. And my Y axis is Y in this case. This was preset. I've done a mistake in the past, so this should be already Y in the default installation of the node. But now if I move things, let's go back to our locator. Now if I move things, you can see I'm moving things up and down. And again, really poor bounding boxes, so make sure that your cursor is actually over this thing. And left and right movement. Now you've seen the Y was actually inverted, so I'm just going to take the invert Y. And now I can move things accurately. However, things still seem to be a little bit sluggish. The locator is moving further than this thing actually moves. So there's a location translation multiplier, and I'm just going to enter a value in here just to make this thing a little bit more sticky. So now things are, as you can see, the same distance the locator travels, the same distance the image travels. So let's bring this where we want it. And let's scale this down to where we want it. And now we have placed it. Now this seemed very complicated. I know it's a very long-winded explanation for something that really it's incredibly fast. So on more complex objects, this is quite helpful. So don't get deterred by my long-winded explanation. Now let's quickly check out the new node, the Manifold Pi Locator. The Manifold Pi Locator is basically a node that has nothing else than locators in it. So we have Locator Translation, Locator Rotation, Locator Scale. And again, we have the same axis remap features that we have on the UV node as well. And the extra attributes which have the Translation Multiplier and a Scale Multiplier as well. Now by default, this transmits 3D information. However, I could create a UV node, hook this up to the inputs here. And now this would basically be a manifold 2D node. And I could hook this up anywhere to my image node, etc. However, personally, I still only use most of the time the 3D and manifold UV node, because especially the manifold UV node is engineered to work best with UVs, you know. However, the Manifold Pi Locator could be used to drive multiple other manifolds. So you can see each manifold still has a coordinate system. So you can override the coordinate system of the manifold. So this is where the Manifold Pi Locator comes in handy. However, in, I would say 80 to 90% of cases, you should be fine just using directly the Manifold 3D or Manifold UV node, which will give you the fastest results. Now this covers the changes to the manifolds as well as the image node, and see you in the next tutorial.